Hi, Fiona.
Hi, Nick.
It's we should be meeting at the wonderful Crown in Stamford, but sadly I got pinged. So now, this on wonderful Freedom Day, we we are at home, and I hope your fridge has got a bit more beer in it than mine has got, because I got caught.
I know, I'm so disappointed. I was so looking forward to my first trip on a proper train to come and sit in a pub with you and have a conversation.
I hear that.
But here we are in my kitchen, which is the coolest place in the house because it's 28 degrees outside. But thank you for taking the time to come and talk to me.
That's quite all right. I'm looking forward to it. So I just wanted to set the scene a little bit. It's been 5 years since the introduction of the Pubs Code. Have you enjoyed the role? You've been in position now, well, within two roles for over half of it. Have you enjoyed working with the pub sector and having to deal with tenant, pub codes and the occasional old stager like myself?
You know, the thing to remember is when I joined the PCA as deputy in December 2017, I had no experience of the pub trade at all. I brought legal skills and experience of dispute resolution, but I had a really steep learning curve. And one of the things that I've learned is that a lot of the key players in the trade are people who have invested their whole working lives in pubs. They feel very passionately about pubs, and there are a lot of different perspectives on where we are and where we should go. You know, and that creates its own challenges, but I like a challenge.
It can certainly be challenging, that's for sure. So initially when the Pubs Code came in, and I think it was very predictable that it would be the case, we had a fairly confrontational relationship between landlord and tenants already, and the Pubs Code coming in initially, I believe, may well have exacerbated that confrontation. Do you believe that as the Pub Code has bedded in, that confrontation has eased or entrenched, or perhaps kind of a mixture of both depending upon the tenant and the Pub Code?
Well, the Pubs Code was introduced after many years of discussions and concerns about the state of the relationship between the Tide Pub tenant and the big pub owning business. And after self-regulation had failed. So there was a lot of pent-up demand and high expectations about what the Pubs Code would deliver. Now, in lots of ways, we've made good progress. I think particularly the pub companies and their code compliance officers are moving to understand that they have to work in a code compliant manner. My relationships with them are improving, and the code compliance officers increasingly are acting as what I want, which is my police within their own organisations. But I'm not complacent. We've got a long way to go. This is about cultural change in the Tide pub trade and at the regulated end of the industry. And it's a work in progress.
Agreed. Do you think that the pandemic has somewhat thrown a spanner in the works? Because you've got a 5-year period that we're at the end of now, and I'm sure we would have liked to have seen plenty of progress within that, but 18 months of it has been subjected to a different world, and a world that none of us could have really predicted.
Yeah, well, I'll say a couple of things. It's certainly set my plans back. I mean, when I took up this role in May last year, were it not for the pandemic, there's certainly things I would have sought to do by now that have had to be pushed forward. There is still work to do around the MRO, around easing tenants' access to it, and I've got to look at a range of regulatory powers at my disposal to see how I can do that, and I will do that. I will say, however, about the pandemic, that it did, in a way, provide a real world example of the power of the code, because what I was able to do during lockdown was engage quite forcefully with the pub owning business about the way in which they were offering discretionary support. Not just that they should offer it, and of course they did, you know, and put a lot of money behind their pubs. But my concern in particular was that they did that transparently so that tenants could see exactly what they would expect, so that the methodology, the approach they were taking was clear. Tenants would know they're being treated fairly. Where pub owning businesses intended not to give support to tenants they alleged were in breach of tenancy, I stopped them doing that. Where some pub owning businesses sought to impose confidentiality agreements on as a condition of a discretionary support, I stopped them doing that. And do you know what? The level of complaints to my office dropped like a stone, because tenants could see that they were being treated fairly. And I've also had first-hand reports from tenants that they really feel that the support that they've had and the way it's been given to them has helped to re-establish or improve relationships with their pub company, which, you know, perhaps in their case had previously been damaged.
I think that's really interesting, because I think one of the key areas that we have, and I've noticed it looks like there's been a bit of a focus on it recently, is about how we communicate those rights to tenants and how they know what those rights are within the pubs code. So we're seeing behaviour improving, as you've just mentioned, and complaints falling, which is great, and that's what we all want. But on the flip side of that, is there an issue about making sure that tenants know and are fully versed in what their pubs code rights are?
There absolutely is. You've really hit the nail on the head for me. Tenants are not going to benefit from their pubs code rights unless they know what they are and they know how they can apply them in a straightforward way. And that's my job, and I'm taking that job quite seriously. You know, what that means is communicating to them about their pubs code rights in as many different ways as I can. So I'm now on Twitter, I'm now on Facebook, I'm now on LinkedIn. I've got a monthly column in the Morning Advertiser. I've been sat behind my keyboard for the last 15 months, like everybody else. And I can't wait to get out to events and meetings and other ways in which I can engage directly with tenants. I'm planning to improve my digital offer as well, so that there's other ways in which tenants can get information about their rights, and improve how the pub companies are communicating to tenants about those rights. So, you know, it's about building tenant confidence in understanding what those rights are and being able to assert them in one-to-one conversations with their pub owning business. So I'll give you a really simple example. A tenant who knows their business development manager needs to record the conversation accurately in writing. I would encourage them to check those notes. If there's something missing in those notes, they've got a right to point it out. You point that out to that business development manager, and that sends the message that you know what your rights are and you want them to be respected, please. And I think that's a very powerful tool.
Oh, that's music to my ears. You probably would imagine how many times I have to say to tenants, have you got the meeting notes? Are they correct? Is there anything missing? If there is, write back and tell them your version of events to make sure that it's on the record. I think that's improved, I have to say, but it was a fairly low bar to start off with.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear. It's definitely a message that I'm repeating a lot, and I'll keep repeating it.
Yes, and I think it's interesting that that I think that's a practice that will be pushed down throughout the industry into areas that aren't covered by the pubs code as well, into the self-regulated area, and I think it's much needed, quite frankly.
Well, it's basic good practice, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and
as well as a legal requirement under the code.
Good tenants will have been doing it for years, but tenants are time poor, as we know. They're very hard-working people, and quite often not the most technically savvy in some cases.
Yeah.
And that does make their, they get the meeting notes, read them, and go, yeah, okay, rather than correct record. Do you think that all of this also is showing to tenants the human side of the PCA and you as the adjudicator?
Well, look, I am human, and there's definitely a sense in which I want to deliver the message of the code and my role personally, and having this conversation with you is part of that. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity. I do want tenants to know who I am. I want them to know the level of my determination that these code principles will be embedded and their rights will be respected. And I do want them to believe that if they go to their code compliance officer with a code problem and they cannot get satisfaction, that they can come to me.
Before I look at what's happening with current tenants and their code rights, I just want to have a little look at how we deal with prospective new tenants.
Yeah.
Do you believe this is an area where all of us, and when I say all of us, I mean you as an adjudicator, myself as an advisor with a trade association, and the pub companies themselves, could do better in reaching out and also informing those new tenants of their rights and how they can have access to the code, access to you, and also about how they look at their agreements?
There is absolutely an issue around new tenants making the right decisions based on proper, comprehensible information. I understand this is all sometimes quite emotive. There's a passion around pubs, and for some people, a dream of owning a pub. And so it's particularly important when they're, when they're at that stage, that the information they need is properly presented so that they can understand it and are more likely to act on it. It's the regulated pub companies that are my concern. And do I think they could do more? Yes, I do. New tenant information isn't just a tick box exercise. It's about presenting the information in the best way to ensure that it's getting their attention and it's sinking in. And so I'm having conversations with the pub companies about how you present it in the best way. And to my mind, that involves checking the tenant's understanding and improving your processes continuously based on what you learn. So this is definitely a key area of work for my team in engaging with the pub owning businesses and getting that new tenant understanding improved.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's your turn to do so when you said that it's an emotive issue, because it clearly is a very emotive issue. And if I give an example of, let's say there's one pub new to the marketplace, and there are 3 prospective tenants there. One is a tenant that's old school, been around the block a bit, and is going for a 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th pub or whatever. They take a look at the proposed lease and proposed deal that's there. They know the marketplace and go, no, that's not right for me. Can I negotiate? And they're told by the pub company, it's a take it or leave it deal. Secondly, there's a new tenant, but that new tenant goes and gets advice. So they come to someone like myself, or there's plenty of others out there. We come to the same conclusion as the old timer tenant who said, well, we need to negotiate this, the deal is not right. That tenant goes back to the pub company and says, it's not right, can I negotiate it? They say it's a take it or leave it deal, we've got other people interested. And almost by default, it ends up with the third tenant, and the third tenant is the one that doesn't take advice. And if they do take advice, they don't take the right sort of advice. So they may take advice from a solicitor on the structure of the lease, but do they take advice on the operational side of the business, the profits that it will produce, et cetera, et cetera? And that's a little bit about it that concerns me, that we need to get that area right for people coming into the business. Otherwise, we end up with escalating rents and poor tenants, which is the worst of all possible scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your point of view, Nick. It's really important that tenants do take advice and listen to that advice. And the other thing I would say is that the business plan is really important. The code requires the pub owning business to ensure the tenant has a sustainable business plan before they take on the business. So it's really important that is what it should be. And I also am engaging with the pub owning businesses to work with them to get them to understand and track how that business plan worked out. With the benefit and hindsight, was it sustainable? And if it wasn't, what were the parts in that process that need to be improved next time around? Because it's a really important document and tenants need to be able to rely on it and trust it.